The bucket slammed down, and murky water drenched the trembling Mustang's scarred body. They laughed, called him a lost cause, a charity case with 3 legs and no worth. But Ember wasn't alone. 15 minutes later, the man they mocked stepped into the clinic. Not just any man, a billionaire no one recognized, until that day. What happened next wasn't revenge, it was redemption. And it began with a horse that had already survived hell and came back to save everyone else. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. It was a cold, brittle morning in Flagstaff, Arizona. A thin veil of frost still clung to the window panes of Clearstone Animal Wellness Center, a high-end veterinary clinic nestled at the edge of a pine forest just outside the city. The sun had barely crested the San Francisco peaks, casting long shadows through the icy glass lobby, where soft piano music played over recessed speakers, the scent of antiseptic mixed with eucalyptus. Everything about the place suggested polished compassion. But behind its sterile beauty, not all hearts beat kindly. In exam stall 3, the back corner of the treatment wing, stood a Mustang unlike any the staff had seen before. Ember, a stallion of striking ash-gray coat, almost silver under bright light, though dulled now by dirt and dried blood. His right hind leg was gone, amputated clean at the hock. The scars across his flanks told stories older than most of the interns at Clearstone. At 8 years old, Ember carried the tension of war horses and the gaze of a monk, haunted, hollow, but aware. His left eye bore a soft cloud from an old injury, and yet it was his silence, not brokenness, that unsettled people. He never flinched, never resisted. He endured. The bucket hit him before the door even latched. A splash of frigid, foul-smelling water sloshed over his back, trailing down his ribs in dirty streams. Ember didn't rear. He didn't whinny. He only trembled, the muscles along his shoulder twitching beneath his ribs as the murk soaked into his patchy winter coat. "Oops," said Dr. Beverly Knox without the slightest tone of remorse. She stood straight-backed in a crisp white lab coat, her chestnut hair drawn tightly into a twist at her crown. Beverly was a woman in her late 40s, tall, slender, composed with razor-like precision. Her lips were always painted in a dry, matte red. Once a rising star in equine medicine, Beverly had grown bitter over the years. A tragic divorce and a high-profile malpractice case, though settled out of court, had hardened her once idealistic drive into rigid contempt. She believed in pedigree, not pity. And Ember, in her mind, was nothing but a resource drain. Trent Hollis laughed behind her. "Charity cases need cleansing, Doc." Trent was built like a gym membership ad, broad-shouldered, thick arms. But his scrubs always looked too tight, more vanity than function. His sandy blonde hair was gelled into permanent rebellion, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. At 29, he had failed upward into his role as veterinary assistant, more through networking than merit. He posted regularly on social media about his clinic days, often with captions like, "Rescue rejects Wednesdays," or "Luxury pups only." It was an open secret among staff that he valued clicks over care. From the doorway, Carly Monroe smirked. "That thing's still alive?" Her voice always sounded bored, like she was waiting for a better party. 24, with ombre blonde hair and acrylic nails clacking against her tablet, Carly was the front desk receptionist, the first face clients saw, and the last one they remembered if they didn't meet her standards. Born into a wealthy Scottsdale family, she had grown up showing horses but had long since replaced compassion with condescension. Rescues made her visibly uncomfortable. None of them noticed the fourth person in the room at first. Lena Rowe had entered silently, as she always did. She was thin, not in a way that suggested vanity, but in the way that suggested life had trimmed her down. 5'7", pale, with dark circles under sea-glass green eyes, she wore her scrub top loosely tucked into worn jeans. Her brown hair was always pulled into a low braid. At 32, Lena had a quiet presence, the kind of person who didn't try to be noticed and therefore often saw more than others expected. She never spoke of her past, but her calm had a weight to it, like someone who had already survived her worst day. She stepped forward now, and in that terrible silence after the splash, the only sound was the slow drip of water from Ember's belly to the concrete floor. Her gaze swept the room once, pausing just long enough to meet Trent's eyes. He looked away first. Then she turned to Dr. Knox, who was wiping her hands on a towel as if the act had been clinical. "What exactly is this?" Lena asked, her voice low even, the same voice one might use in a burning building, to calm, not to accuse. Beverly didn't blink. "The animal startled me. Water was nearby. Accidents happen." Lena said nothing. She walked up to Ember, placed a gloved hand gently against his trembling flank, and leaned in close to his muzzle. His breath was short, frightened, but not panicked. She murmured something only he could hear. Then she stood, looked back at the three. 15 minutes, she said, and left. No shouting, no protest, just that phrase. Behind her, Trent scoffed. "Is she calling PETA or something?" Beverly muttered something about people who don't understand triage. Carly rolled her eyes. But Ember, soaked and silent, slowly turned his one good eye toward the hallway where Lena had vanished, and waited. The snow was beginning to melt off the pine branches as late morning sunlight pushed through the gray sky above Flagstaff. Along the highway cutting through the East Ridge, a matte black SUV turned onto the service road leading to Clearstone Animal Wellness Center. It moved deliberately, tires crunching over frost-bitten gravel. In the back seat sat a man whose name was never spoken aloud in public places. Not because it was feared, but because no one knew to say it. Rowan Mears was tall, but the kind of tall that stooped slightly as if always expecting bad news. 45, with streaks of silver in his thick black hair and a trim beard that grew in uneven patches, his features bore a quiet gravity. Deep-set eyes, gray-blue like granite fog, looked at the world not with curiosity, but with assessment. His clothing, dark wool coat, dark slacks, and black leather gloves, was impeccably tailored, but nondescript. That was his gift. Rowan knew how to vanish, even while standing in a room. To the world, he was the former founder of Centera Biogenics, a revolutionary biotech firm based out of New York. A man whose name once graced Forbes covers and TED stages. But 5 years ago, after a boating accident on Lake Michigan claimed both his wife and daughter, Rowan withdrew entirely from public life. The world believed he had fled to Europe, to some private island in Croatia, or perhaps checked himself into a monastery. They were all wrong. He had moved to northern Arizona, where no one cared about technology empires or investment portfolios. He bought a cabin off Walnut Canyon and lived alone, cooking his own meals, reading old books, and hiking with no destination. The only thing he hadn't expected was the horse. He'd seen Ember 3 years ago, the day he visited a failing Mustang rescue in northern New Mexico. The visit was not charitable. It was his planned farewell. Rowan had been ready to end it all that night, his affairs in order, will signed, and final instructions left on the kitchen table. But the man who owned the rescue insisted Rowan meet the one who doesn't scream anymore. The horse had been laying on a torn blanket in the back stall, ribs showing, one hind leg grotesquely bandaged, barely conscious. But when Rowan stepped close, Ember lifted his head, slowly, painfully, and looked straight at him. Not pleading, not afraid, just present, alive in defiance of everything that had tried to extinguish him. Rowan sat in the stall for nearly 3 hours that day. He didn't say a word, neither did Ember, but something broke open inside him. He didn't end his life that night. Instead, he wrote the first of many anonymous checks. Since then, Rowan had funded over a dozen specialized recovery centers for wounded horses. He never used his real name, always filtering donations through shell companies and private foundations. Clearstone was the newest of them, built under the promise of equitable care for all animals. He had handpicked Lena Rowe from another clinic in Sedona for her quiet precision and moral clarity. She didn't ask questions when he said Ember would be registered under a false ownership, and she didn't flinch when asked to keep his identity secret. Until now. Rowan stepped out of the SUV as it pulled into the staff entrance. He was met by 2 people, a tall, freckled man in his 50s wearing a charcoal vest and a woman in a long navy peacoat with a clipboard. The man, Elias Brooke, had been Rowan's private legal counsel for over a decade. Gruff but ethical, Elias was known for not tolerating fools or injustice. The woman, Vivienne Cross, was a sharp-featured compliance auditor with hawk eyes and a no-nonsense tone. She'd left a 6-figure consulting job to work for Rowan because she believed in silent reform over loud policy. "They're in exam 3, Vivienne said quietly, leading the way. "Security cameras confirmed the incident. Trent Hollis and Dr. Knox participated directly. The third, Monroe, stood by and filmed part of it. Rowan said nothing. He walked ahead of them, coat billowing slightly, hands still in his pockets. As they approached the treatment wing, the air shifted. A nurse looked up from behind the desk, did a double take, and instinctively stood. He didn't recognize the man, but something about Rowan's presence triggered deference. Inside the examination stall, Ember still stood exactly where Lena had left him, shaking slightly, his wet coat sticky with stale water. Trent was leaning against the counter, scrolling his phone. Dr. Knox stood near the sink, organizing tools, pretending not to be disturbed. Carly wasn't in the room. The second Rowan stepped through the door, Ember moved. Not wildly, not fearfully, but with unmistakable recognition. His head lifted, ears pricked forward, and he took one uneven step forward, then another, until his chest pressed against Rowan's coat. Trent blinked. "What the?" Rowan lowered to one knee, unbothered by the cement floor or the stench of filth. He placed a gloved hand against Ember's neck, eyes closing briefly as the horse exhaled into his chest. "What happened?" Rowan asked without looking up. Dr. Knox bristled. "It was an accident." The animal startled. Rowan cut her off with a glance. One brief, surgical glance that stripped away pretense. "You poured water on a crippled rescue horse, mocked him, and allowed him to be filmed while trembling in fear." "Sir," Trent stammered. "We didn't know." "That's the problem," Rowan said softly. "You didn't need to know. It should never have mattered." Elias stepped forward, opening a small leather folder. "All three of you are suspended indefinitely pending a formal investigation. Your contracts permit an internal review of all clinic footage, device data, and communication logs." Vivian added, "Do not attempt to delete anything. Forensic retrieval teams are on their way." Dr. Knox's professional mask wavered. "Who are you?" Rowan rose slowly, still keeping one hand on Ember. "I'm the reason this place exists. I'm the man who built it under the belief that pain should be treated with dignity, not disdain." Then he turned to Ember. "Let's get you cleaned up, old friend." The atmosphere in Clearstone's executive conference suite was thick with tension. Morning light poured through the tall windows overlooking the pine woods of Flagstaff, but inside the air felt cold and stale. A long, mahogany table stretched the length of the room, surrounded by leather-backed chairs and softly humming air purifiers. It had been designed for quiet deals, clinical precision, and the gentle murmur of quarterly reports. Not confrontation, not this. Rowan Mears stood at the head of the table, still in his dark wool coat, the collar turned slightly against his neck. His gloved hands rested calmly on the tabletop, but there was nothing calm about the look in his eyes. Beside him stood Elias Brooke, his lawyer, now flipping through a leather-bound binder thick with documentation. Vivian Cross remained standing by the touchscreen panel at the far end of the room, prepared to project security footage on command. Across from Rowan sat Dr. Hafford Green, chairman of the clinic's board. A man in his early 60s, Dr. Green had a neatly trimmed gray beard and wore gold-framed glasses perched low on a long nose. His voice was naturally soft, almost apologetic in tone, but his mind was sharp and political. He had built his reputation over decades as a mediator, a donor favorite, and a shrewd navigator of boardroom politics. And right now, he was nervous. Seated beside him were Gina Mears, head of operations, a broad-shouldered woman in her early 40s with short auburn hair and a no-nonsense tone, and Clint Rourke, the clinic's finance director, thin and balding, with a nervous habit of tapping the side of his coffee mug. Neither had spoken since Rowan walked in. The video played in silence. Trent's voice echoed from the monitor. "Hey doggy, say cheese for my followers." Then came the splash. The unmistakable sound of liquid hitting fur and concrete. The angle caught Dr. Knox's hand holding the bucket, and Carly laughing softly in the background, her phone raised like it was nothing more than another TikTok moment. When the footage ended, no one moved. Rowan's voice came low and deliberate. "This isn't just misconduct. This is cruelty. Deliberate, calculated cruelty. And it happened under a banner that claims to stand for compassion." Dr. Green exhaled slowly. "Rowan, William, if I may." "No," Rowan interrupted. "You may not." He had never revealed his legal first name to anyone at the clinic. That Dr. Green had found it reminded Rowan just how many layers had been peeled back this morning. "I've spent 3 years funding this facility. Rowan continued, his voice gaining intensity. Because I believed animals like Ember deserved better. I believed that people like Lena Rowe, who risk her career every time she defies toxic culture, deserved support, and I believed this institution could lead by example. He paused. I don't believe that anymore. Vivian tapped the panel again. A second video loaded. This one, recorded from a hidden body cam Lena had worn during previous visits, showed a different scene. Dr. Knox refusing to authorize pain medication for a retired police K-9. Another showed Trent mocking a limping foal brought in by a Navajo family from the reservation, laughing that they should have brought in a receipt instead. We've compiled 6 months of internal footage, Vivian said coolly. Lena documented everything. She sent it to us 2 nights ago. Dr. Green shifted uncomfortably. I had no idea the culture had deteriorated this far. Rowan smiled, but it wasn't kind. Of course you didn't, because all your reports came from Dr. Knox and Trent. Clint Rourke finally spoke, voice dry. What happens now? Elias answered. Immediate termination of Dr. Beverly Knox, Trent Hollis, and Carly Monroe. They are to be escorted off the premises today. Their access revoked. A forensic audit of all patient care records will begin within 48 hours. And, Rowan added, the $80 million earmarked for the Mustang Rehabilitation Wing is officially frozen. I'm not funding another square foot of this place until it proves it deserves to exist. Dr. Green raised a hand. Wait, Rowan, think of the patients, the long-term care animals that rely on this place. I am, Rowan said. That's why this place needs to be gutted and rebuilt from the inside. At that moment, the door opened and Lena Rowe entered quietly, Ember beside her. The Mustang had been washed and brushed, though the scars along his flanks and missing hind legs still made his gait uneven. He moved slowly but confidently, his head held high. His eyes were alert, fixed not on the strangers around him, but on Rowan. Lena nodded once. He's stable. Vitals are strong. We've administered antibiotics to prevent infection from the exposure. Lena's presence shifted the tone of the room. She stood with straight shoulders, hands behind her back, like a soldier ready to testify. She wasn't the kind of woman who liked speaking in crowds, but when she did, every word landed. You asked what happens now, she said, addressing the room. Now you decide if you want to keep pretending or start fixing what's broken. Ember lowered his head slightly, resting his muzzle against Rowan's hip. The gesture was so human, so quietly trusting, that even Gina Mears blinked rapidly, swallowing the lump in her throat. Rowan placed his hand on the horse's neck again. This facility exists because of him, because he didn't give up when no one helped, and neither will I. Outside the conference room, security had already begun escorting Dr. Knox from the treatment wing. Carly had locked herself in the break room. Trent tried to protest but was silenced with a single sentence from Vivian, "The footage is admissible in court." By afternoon, Clearstone's staff had received an official notice of emergency restructuring. Rowan remained in the building, quietly reviewing files, consulting with Elias and Vivian, while Lena returned to the stables to prepare Ember's treatment schedule. But the ripple effect had already begun. By the following morning, the wind over Flagstaff had shifted. The sun crept higher, and the scent of thawing earth clung to the pine needles as Clearstone Animal Wellness Center prepared for a reckoning. A full staff meeting was called, mandatory, urgent, and deeply unsettling. No agenda had been listed, no speaker named, but everyone knew. You could see it in the way conversations died in hallways, in how the technicians clutched their morning coffee like armor, and how the once boisterous Carly Monroe's absence hung like a bell no one wanted to ring. The staff assembled in the atrium conference hall, a glass-walled structure overlooking the East Meadow. Normally used for charity galas and donor dinners, the space had been stripped bare. No white linen tablecloths, no orchids. Just rows of chairs and one large screen. Rowan Mears stood at the front with his hands folded behind his back. He had changed into a dark turtleneck and charcoal blazer, more relaxed than the day before, but his presence remained unignorable. He waited until the final staff member filed in. Then he nodded to Vivian Cross, who stood near the projector with her sleek navy suit and ever-present clipboard. "Good morning," Rowan began, his voice clear but not theatrical. "What we're about to review is not a punishment. It's an autopsy." A murmur passed through the room. Vivienne tapped the screen, and a timeline appeared. 6 months of footage, audio transcripts, and internal messages. She didn't narrate. The images and text spoke for themselves. Footage of rescue horses being passed over for painkillers in favor of pedigreed poodles. Emails discussing how to make the mutts wait longer. Text messages mocking Ember's missing leg. A recorded conversation where a junior vet asked if a wounded stray should be taken seriously, only to be told by Trent, if it doesn't wear a ribbon, it doesn't get attention. Silence followed. Then Rowan stepped forward again. 53 cases, he said, voice low but resolute. 53 times where a horse, dog, or cat with no pedigree received inferior care. Not because of budget, not because of triage, but because of culture. In the front row sat Lena Rowe, newly promoted, now in a navy scrub jacket bearing the Clearstone insignia with a new title beneath it, Director of Mustang Rehabilitation. Her expression was unreadable, though her knuckles were white around a pen. She had showered early, braided her hair tight, and reviewed her notes 3 times. Lena had never wanted a title, but Rowan had insisted, and she had agreed on one condition, that her first act would be to personally audit every ongoing rescue case in the system. Next to her sat Sarah Glenn, a new face to most of the team. Sarah had been transferred from the Sedona clinic 3 days earlier, but hadn't yet begun her rotation. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with a willowy frame, clear almond skin, and tightly coiled dark brown hair pulled into a loose bun. In her early 30s, Sarah wore no makeup, no jewelry, only a lanyard with her ID and a steady gaze. She had grown up in a family of ranchers outside Durango, Colorado, where she'd once nursed an injured mule back to health after it had been left for dead by a passing transport. That moment, at age 12, shaped her. She'd learned that quiet care was louder than any speech. Sarah had joined Rowan's network of silent allies after filing a whistleblower report on a former clinic that overcharged military veterans with service dogs. Since then, she had worked on multiple pilot programs for rehabilitating abused working animals. Her transfer to Clearstone had been intentional, though few in the room knew that. Rowan gestured toward the back, and Ember entered. He walked without fear now. Still 3-legged, still scarred, but clean and alert. A soft harness supported his weight, specially designed to ease his stride on tile floors. A volunteer named Maya Eaton, a vet tech in her early 20s with short blue hair and a constellation of piercings, guided him. Maya had been the first intern to ever pet Ember without flinching, and she did so now, gently pressing a hand to his withers. "This horse," Rowan said, "is the reason any of us are here." And yesterday, Ember gave back again. He lifted a small folder from the table. During a routine blood panel, our lab flagged an anomaly. Upon further study, Dr. Elise Tran, our consulting immunologist, discovered a rare antibody in Ember's system, one that shows early-stage resistance against an aggressive subtype of osteosarcoma, bone cancer. In early simulations, the antibody attacked the tumor cells without damaging healthy tissue. Gasps scattered through the room like dropped silverware. Rowan continued, "We don't know yet what this means, but we know it's real. And we know Ember's suffering may someday help save children, horses, even humans battling cancer." From the back, Dr. Elise Tran stood, nodding politely. She was Vietnamese-American, in her late 40s, with silver-streaked hair tied into a low bun and soft rectangular glasses. Calm, clinical, and brilliant, Elise had published extensively in comparative immunology and had joined the clinic's advisory board on Sarah's recommendation. She offered no drama, only facts. "Preliminary findings are promising," she said simply. "We'll proceed with further analysis pending ethical clearance." Ember paused near the podium. Rowan placed a hand on the horse's neck and turned back to the staff. "Let me be clear," he said. Ember was once left in a ravine to die. He was deemed worthless, damaged, a burden. But today, he may be holding the answer to saving others. His voice tightened slightly. "There is no such thing as just a horse." No one moved. After a long pause, Dr. Green, still stunned from the previous day, stood slowly and cleared his throat. "Mr. Mears, on behalf of the board and staff, we failed. We let this happen, and I believe I speak for many when I say we're ready to rebuild, to follow your lead." Rowan didn't smile. He only nodded once. "Good, because starting tomorrow, Clearstone changes." Staff murmured again, some fearful, others uncertain, a few relieved. Rowan raised a hand. Every patient will be treated based on need, not perceived value. Billing will be restructured. All personnel will undergo retraining in ethical care standards, and yes, that includes the board. No exceptions. And Lena Rowe will oversee all rescue animal cases from this point forward. Then he turned to Sarah. Miss Glenn has joined us as Deputy Rehabilitation Director. She will work under Lena and lead our community outreach efforts to shelters and rescue networks across the region. A few staff clapped softly and Sarah nodded politely. No grand gestures, no words, just quiet readiness. After the meeting, as staff filtered out, Rowan remained behind with Ember, Lena, and Sarah. Maya returned to clean Ember's harness while Elise reviewed data on her tablet. Outside, the sky brightened. It would snow again tomorrow, but today, at least, was clear. 6 months passed, and the snow that once buried Flagstaff had turned to wildflowers and clover. The pine-covered hills breathed in the spring with a kind of soft resolve, as if the land itself understood the importance of renewal. Where once stood the sterile walls of Clearstone Animal Wellness Center, now rose something warmer, something earned. The new sign, carved into locally sourced oak, read, Embers Rise Equine Sanctuary. Built on the same foundation, yet spiritually transformed, the sanctuary now bore a healing garden along its eastern edge, where lavender bushes curled beside smooth gravel paths. The new therapy wing, designed specifically for abused and disabled horses, featured wider stalls, padded floors, and ambient lighting calibrated for animals who had suffered in silence. Wind chimes whispered at the garden gate, and in their center stood a dawn redwood, barely taller than a child, its leaves soft and pale green against the morning light. People gathered in the garden on this clear May morning for the dedication ceremony. Families from the nearby Navajo Nation, retired veterans who had adopted rescue horses, children from the cancer center Ember now visited. The air buzzed with conversations in multiple languages and quiet anticipation. Ember stood at the front beneath a white canopy, wearing a custom-built prosthetic that shimmered with silver-gray titanium and dark blue padding. The harness was specially designed to mirror the weight and balance of a natural limb, allowing the now 9-year-old stallion to walk, even trot, with graceful stability. His mane had grown fuller, and the once haunted cloud in his left eye had cleared slightly. Only the scar remained, like a seal of endurance. At his side stood Maya Eaton, her blue hair tied back in a braid and her name tag now reading Senior Vet Technician. She had grown into her role with quiet devotion, learning to speak softly to every creature and to see more with silence than others could with words. Ember trusted her completely, his breath even, body calm. In front of him, a ceremonial ribbon was strung across 2 carved posts, fluttering lightly in the breeze. William Rowan Mears stood to the left of the crowd, dressed not in his usual black, but in an open-collared slate blue shirt, sleeves rolled, expression unguarded. His beard had thickened, and the rigid lines around his mouth had softened in the months since Ember's story became public. Beside him stood Lena Rowe, now in an olive-green field vest with the sanctuary's emblem sewn over her heart. Her hair was shorter, practicality over sentiment, and her demeanor even more grounded, though her eyes never stopped moving, always watching over her horses. Sarah Glenn was speaking at the podium now. Her voice carried over the small amphitheater with calm conviction. This sanctuary is not built on pity, she said, but on partnership. Every scar, every limp, every tremble is proof not of weakness but survival. And today we celebrate those who chose to heal and those who helped them do it. Then came the moment. With a gentle nudge of his hoof against a small touchpad at the base of the podium, wired to a low-voltage trigger, Ember activated the mechanism that cleanly sliced the ribbon. The crowd erupted in applause, some rising to their feet. Maya gave Ember a soft kiss on the neck, and he nickered in return, ears forward, eyes bright. Rowan stepped forward next. This place was never meant to be about one animal, he began. But it started with one. A horse that was thrown away and who showed us all what survival looks like. Ember didn't ask to be saved. He simply endured long enough for someone to notice. He paused. Today he stands as a reminder that no creature is ever beyond redemption. After the ceremony, guests filtered into the garden paths, guided by volunteers. One by one, groups visited the memorial stone wall, where names of lost rescue animals had been engraved into river rock. Among the volunteers was Trent Hollis, wearing a plain polo with the badge of the Northern Mountain Animal Shelter. His sleeves were rolled, revealing new tattoos, wildflowers and paw prints running along his arm. He had spent the past 5 months cleaning kennels, repairing fencing, and driving rescue transport vans across state lines. He no longer posted on social media. His voice was quieter now, and his humor, still present, had learned to punch upward, not down. He guided a group of schoolchildren to the stables, where they met Dusty, a pony rescued from a hoarding case in Utah. He introduced Dusty not with flair, but with respect. "She's got more attitude than all of us combined," he joked gently. "She earned it." In the West Pavilion, Carly Monroe sat at a check-in table beside a cart filled with folders, each marked with a name and therapy schedule. She was in her early stages of building a program to bring Mustang therapy to rural assisted living homes. Her blonde hair now tied in a tidy bun, her clothing plain. Her voice was gentle as she confirmed dates and arranged logistics. A retired woman in a wheelchair reached for her hand and said, "Thank you, dear." Carly's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded. And in the heart of the healing garden stood a familiar figure, now almost unrecognizable. Dr. Beverly Knox had traded her pristine lab coat for a wide-brimmed straw hat and thick gardening gloves. Her once sharply dyed brown hair had given way to gray, left untouched. Lines had deepened on her face, not from stress, but from time lived more honestly. She knelt beside the young redwood tree, patting the soil around its roots with care. The eucalyptus sapling she had planted 6 months earlier had survived the frost. A small plaque read, "For the ones I failed, and the ones I must honor now." As the crowd passed, many offered nods. Some paused, some didn't, but none shouted, no one mocked. That was forgiveness in its truest form, not forgetting but continuing. Ember approached quietly behind her, unprompted. Beverly turned. Their eyes met, her breath hitched, but she didn't retreat. She simply held out her hand. He stepped forward, pressed the soft curve of his jaw into her palm, and closed his eyes. A hush fell over the garden. And then, as if all the pain, all the headlines, all the blame had melted into something that no longer needed to be named, Beverly whispered, "I'm sorry." Ember did not move away. Sometimes, the most broken among us hold the greatest power to heal, not just themselves, but others. Ember was cast aside, deemed useless because of his scars. But it was those very scars that made him a symbol of hope, strength, and quiet forgiveness. In our daily lives, it's easy to overlook those who carry visible or invisible wounds. But healing begins when someone sees worth where others see weakness. Whether it's a rescued animal, a forgotten neighbor, or even a part of yourself you've learned to hide. Remember this: everyone deserves a second chance. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't just a gift we give others. It's the key to our own peace. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that redemption is always possible. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this.